All right, here we have another Moby assignment. Like I said, I'm kind of going in order, so this is number three, and this is a little more complex. We're using a lot. Well, the other ones did have like Android specific with the text view, but these are kind of more in depth a little bit, I suppose. So I'm just going at kind of an alphabetical order. Main activity got a little mixed up in there, but we'll go over that. So first is ball. Now, Um, I do this in my other projects, but I didn't end up doing in this one. This is where I was getting more familiar with Android Studio, but at the same time, it ramped up probably an equal amount, so I was still focusing on getting it done. A lot later, I still do the better code practices, and in this one, there still is good code practice. It's just not everywhere. And the reason I'm saying this is because there's three different shapes, ball, rectangle, and square. So obviously in a better program, you would have them inherit from one shape class, but here I don't have that. So I'll just show you what I have. So this is the ball. Uh, you have, your X, your Y, your speed. It's a ball, so you have radius. And then first constructor, which just takes a color and then sets everything else as defaults. And then another one that takes everything. There's no acceleration here. And this is done in assignment advancing on this, but the move with collision detection is not separate here either. I kind of and we did one with test cases. So that was one where you really had to make things separate and make them better. And then draw, which draws an oval or a circle, and then your gets. And then bouncing ball view. This is since we're doing things, it's not a text view, it's not a default. We're doing all this ball and shape movement. We have to have a custom view for it. And the view is we have a list of the different shapes. That would also be easier to do if you have them all inherited from one class. And then here's some scores. I'll get into that in a second. So it starts off, we have a box which is just this. It's very simple. It's just a rectangle that takes up the entire screen of the phone, basically. Then we draw that first. Then we draw our balls, and see these are the default ones. So uh, round rectangle button, just as a little joke there. And see that button adds more. But these are just the defaults. See it adds a new one to balls, and then this was used to prevent errors, but I found that it just having a separate one wasn't needed, but I kept it in. See that the ball variable is set to but never used, never properly used. And then add another ball, and then same for a rectangle and same for squares. Then set it to focusable, so you can touch it. Then we have our on draw, which is simple. These are just adding to the array lists, and this is actually drawing them, so it calls the draw method from the shapes. And then to we had to check for a collision, which is shown in the log cat. It's going to be a bit messy. See, if I just type ball and see, that's for the collision. I just made a little joke there. You can see it's a weird description. So obviously to do that, it's very easy. You can do it in the draw, where you just check if they're touching. So that's what my collision class is for. That's a shapes touching. If I see that's what's that used for, so I do that check in a separate class. And I'll show that in a second. And then it's the same thing for squares. So see, if I had this all inheriting from one class, you'd only have to have one, and then it'd be a little bigger because you have to do separate checks for if squares and rectangles are touching. or if balls and rectangles are touching. And then invalidate to resize, or not resize, redraw the screen. Then on size change, that's you know, mm, to make sure the ball stays within the bounds. Then we have on touch, which you have to swipe a certain speed, but you can see balls are being added, and that is on purpose, just so that you know if there's too many of one shape, or I think too many of any shape collectively, it resets, or it deletes that shape rather. So this is we have the motion event move, and then we get the delta x and delta y and delta time, so we can actually have a speed to see how fast we should be. You know, it's a physics where, well, not physics specifically, but if you have the delta time, delta, or if you have these variables, you can get distance, and then the speed is just distance over time. Just basic math. So you can, and then we have a decide speed, which is what it's being compared to. So that's how you decide how fast you have to swipe for different shapes. So that's why, if you the speed is less than the decide speed, it'll do circles. But if you go really fast, it'll give you a square. Kind of hard to tell because there's so many on here now, but and then this is it calls these methods to clear if there's too many shapes, and then we save the new XY time, and we return, of course. And this is the rectangle button. It just click it, it creates a shape, or it creates a rectangle button, of course. Main activity, it just calls the bouncing ball view, and has the button. Clear shapes, this is how we clear them. So you create it with what you want your limit to be for each shape. Then there's your clear for each one, which, like I said, it takes be easier with a separate, or a class that these all inherit from. And then, you know, just you just check if the size of the balls that you're putting it, or the size of the array list of shape you're putting in here. And then if the size is greater, it clears. And then it adds one so that there's nothing in there. And to make it gamey, because that was one of the requirements, see, you want to get that to 0. So if you have too many balls, it halves the rectangle limit, and then the rectangle halves the square limit, and so on, until you can only have one of each. Then random colors, this is another pretty simple one. It's just you have a high, low, and then it just generates a random number. Since RGB goes from 0 to 256, that's how it's intended to be used, but this is just say you only want a certain range of colors. That's why that would be useful. And then, like I mentioned, a rectangle is pretty much the same, other than you have a width and a height um, instead of just a radius. And then same for square, except for they're the same, so no need to go over that. And then is touching, just have a little bit of math here. So you put in, see, it's overloading. So if you put in a rectangle and a square, it'll do this one, or if you put in a rectangle and a ball, it'll do this one. So you can just call it and then put in the two shapes, and then you get all, said not so basic math to some, but just math to calculate now to test, or not to test. I don't know why I said that, but to check against each other. You get the x against the radius, or x plus radius, and then if it's greater than y, then, and then if all of these are true, that's why we have the and. And then I guess the last thing to show is the main activity, but there's nothing really here. Since this is the bouncing ball view, you just have to put the custom view in there, and then the button on top of it. And I'll show this window. See, it's just that. It has the custom view, so it's custom. And yeah, so this is the shapes one. See, it's more complex and also, as a result, more visually interesting. But that's kind of what I have to say on this, and I'll see you next time.